everybody, and welcome to another edition of Make It March. This is the month to make everything that you have had on your list, whether it's a knitted project, crochet project, hand sewing, machine sewing, quilting, stitch work. You can also bake, or you can try out new recipes. So I am here every Friday at 3 p.m. live, and my purpose is just to inspire you and keep your spirits lifted, and maybe present some possibilities for projects for you. I'll be showing my works in progress, also known as WIPs, and finished objects, also known as FOs. So please feel free to say hello in the comments. Let us know where you're watching us from, what the weather's like. All I can say for today's weather in Muskoka is that it is very blustery and cold. The wind started up late yesterday, afternoon or evening for us, after a beautiful stretch of nice, warm, mild weather. And we had our hopes up that spring was here a little bit earlier, but we really know what March is like. March is the most unpredictable month. You could wake up in the morning and have 2 feet of snow in Muskoka, and a couple days before you could have been sun tanning on your deck. So it's very unpredictable. So what I'm going to show you first is this is pretty much a finished object. I showed you last week. I think I was maybe halfway through one panel, and it has now almost been fully seamed. And this is the Milo Poncho. We're going to have it in kits. We'll have it in kits probably starting next week, and I'll show you the different colors and tell you a little bit about the yarn and the construction. So this month I was focusing on trying projects, knitting projects that had unusual construction, just to be a little bit different. I was getting a bit in a rut. Too many projects worked from the bottom up, and too many projects worked from the top down. So as you know, in knitting and crochet, you can really go all different directions. This one consists of 2 panels. So the first panel is a straight strip with a little notched bottom. I'll bring it closer to the camera so you can see as well. And then you make an identical strip to match. Each strip consists of an open work lace pattern, which is a very giant yarn over, even larger than a buttonhole. And the other half of the panel is a rib pattern with little bundles. This is where you're wrapping stitches around to pull them together and create almost like a starburst effect. So I have used 2 100-gram skeins of Milo. In the bin here we've got the colors that are in stock currently. So this is a hand-spun, hand-dyed yarn from a women's co-op, and the company name is Manos del Uruguay. It's a combination of 65% merino, 35% linen. And that's really important if you want the yarn to drape, but you also want to have the softness and the elasticity of the wool. So linen gives you the drape and that gorgeous rustic finish, and the merino gives you the softness and the elasticity and holds everything together. So these are 100-gram skeins that I've used, and the yardage is 380. It is what we would call a sport weight yarn, and the pattern required 4.5 millimeter or US 7 straight needles. You could use circular, but it's just very narrow strips that you're working on. And each strip was worked to a total of 29.5 inches. And that measurement is important to note that you have to block it. So while you're measuring it and it's fresh on the needles, you have to remember after blocking, it's going to grow a little bit more in the length and also in the width. There is a larger size, so that would require 3 skeins. So what we have currently in the store is this beautiful warm magenta color and the indigo blue. And then we have a medium purple or medium plum. It's got a nice gray undertone. And a beautiful green. And the green, the more you look at it, the more interesting it becomes, because it has sections of teal and blue. And then we have a nice blush rose color. Next week in the shop, when the kits are being put together, we will have a dark charcoal and also a lighter shade of green. So in between a spring and a summer green. So those are all the color combinations for the Milo Poncho. And now I can talk to you about the construction. I'll bring it over to the camera so you can see a little closer. Okay, so the first panel is knit, and then the second panel is a direct copy of it. So you can see here I've started to seam it together. The pattern will give you a schematic drawing, and it will tell you what sections to measure out, where to put your markers. I've put a marker at the top and the bottom, so that tells me that the second panel has to fit in there. It's really like a jigsaw puzzle. It's super interesting, but not too complicated. So generally when we're sewing a 2-piece poncho, we do have 2 seams, one across the front and then identical across the back. And that gives it the asymmetric effect. So here I've started seaming, and I've just pinned the rest of the way, so I know that my seam has to end here. But this particular pattern has an even more interesting construction, because they are suggesting, and remember in knitting, sometimes it's only a suggestion, you can make up your mind. They're suggesting that you sew the sides closed, so that would create a sleeve. So I've pinned it here where their schematics told me to. So there would be a side seam here and on the other side. Now I'm not 100% sure that I'm going to like it sewn up here. So what I'm going to do is finish seaming the front and back, which will hold the poncho together, and then I'll try it on and decide if maybe the sides should be open. So this is what it would look like with the side open. You just get a floppy sleeve coverage and then the open side. Or I have to seam it together. So this is where my seam would happen. So that keeps it quite fitted across the hip area. And thinking of wardrobe items for spring and summer, skirts, dresses, which are going to be a bit fuller than our winter wardrobe, I'm just not 100% sure if it should be closed in or left open. So give me your thoughts on that. Let me know what you think. Hi Anne. Thanks for watching. Hi Karen. So again, there's a close-up of the front. It's just a sweet little slip-over poncho, 2 different patterns side by side, and then 1 seam up the front, 1 seam up the back, and then I'm still a bit perplexed as to whether I should do the side seams and make it a poncho pullover. If I don't do the side seams, then it is a traditional poncho. So that took me about a week of knitting. And I probably knit a little bit quicker on it than usual because I was really intrigued. I wanted to see the finished block sample, so I did block the strips first, soaking in Eucalan, pinning them out to the required measurements on the schematic, and then I was really eager. I would go and check to see if the strips were dry, wait until the next morning, check again, they still weren't dry, and then when I came home from work they were dry, so I could lay them out and get an idea of how it would go together. And I will show you the finished poncho on a model, because sometimes the mannequin gives you a different look. So that is what it will look like when it's worn. And the schematic, this is the schematic for the small to medium and the large to extra large. So what they've done there is given you A equals 44 centimeters, so that's the width of each strip. And then you can see X equals 26, so that's telling you where you have to position your markers. 26 centimeters down the strip. D equals 44, so again you put markers in those positions. G equals 20 centimeters, and on the other side Y, F, and the remainder is 16. So once the markers are in place, you just follow the instructions here, and it tells you, let's see, for example, sew section A to B. So you look for A, and that is here, and then you look for B. So this 44 section fits into this 44 centimeter section. It may sound a little confusing, but if you sit down with a clear mind and a strong cup of coffee or tea, it is very doable. So that is the Milo Poncho, and a few of you have asked if it will be in kits or available in our online shop. So yes, it will be. Everything worth waiting for next week. I don't have any comments here. Yes, Anne says I finished the poncho very quickly. And that again was because I wanted to get to the finish line to see how it all came together. So next up, I have another whip. And this one is not knit by me, but I did borrow it because I think it's so beautiful just to show on camera. Can anyone tell what it's going to become? Very, very slow, tedious knitting because the needles are so small, and it's a fingering weight yarn. And I'm going to bring it up closer, and you can see the detail effect. Can you see the arrowheads? And there's actually one strand of fingering in charcoal worked across the row in Fair Isle with one strand of cream also in the fingering. And then once one repeat is finished, our lovely knitter decided to put in a strand of fine kid mohair and silk in the black, just to give it a little more luxury and fluff. Now she didn't want to combine the mohair throughout the Fair Isle because, as you know, the mohair is quite fuzzy and that can distort or blur the straight lines here. So that would upset the pattern a little bit when you look at it. So she has knit with a provisional cast on according to the pattern, and it's going to be a cowl. This cowl can wrap around the neck twice because it will be finished at 60 inches. So she has 2 more repeats to knit, and then she can graft the 2 ends together, and it's just a stunning pattern. And I think there is a hat pattern to match and wrist warmers if leftovers. So that is part of a collection of designs called Knitting from the North. I'll put the link in the comments below for anything I've shown you that has a pattern available on Ravelry. Knitting from the North is modern, Nordic, and Fair Isle designs. So they have a lot of different cowls, just in 2 colors, worked in Fair Isle. They have wrist warmers, mitts, hats, all sorts of winter accessories. So the yarn that she's using in the charcoal and the cream is our Tradition sock. So these are the exact colors here. And this is a combination of wool and nylon, superwash wool with nylon, 100-gram skeins, and 437 yards each. Altogether, for this 60-inch length, she will the pattern requires that she uses 800 yards of the charcoal, the main, and 345 yards of the cream. So I think 1 skein, and this one she would be using 3 skeins. So that really is not a lot of yarn for such a big cozy cowl. And the inside looks nice and neat and tidy. Anytime you're doing Fair Isle in a cowl pattern, you're making it double thickness just by carrying the yarn across the back. So this pattern is calling for 3 millimeter. You could use straight or circular needles, because remember, the cowl is knit this way. It's not knit in a round tube. It only becomes a seamless tube when it's grafted together. And I think she may have gone up to 3 1/4. Yes. Sometimes if a pattern calls for 3 millimeter and you just think, oh my gosh, that's going to take me forever, you can cheat a little bit and go to a 3 1/4. And what that does is just create a little bit looser fabric. It doesn't change the tension that much. So that is another whip that came in the door today, and I was excited to show it to you. The third one is something that I started yesterday, and this is also Ravelry pattern, so I'll put the link in the comments below. It's called Twiggly. It's a very innovative shawl. Well, I shouldn't have told you it's a shawl, because when you look at it, most of you would assume, oh, she's knitting another hat or a baby bonnet, but no, this is going to become a beautiful shawl. And I'm knitting in the fingering weight earth monochrome, which is extra fine, really, really bouncy hand-dyed merino. And if you want a close-up of the pattern so far, you can see that there is a diamond motif in the center. It's all knit in the round, so there's no seams. So first I had to do a garter stitch diamond motif by increasing and then decreasing. And the fun thing about the diamond is there are built-in stitches to pick up after. So when I finished the diamond, the instructions told me to pick up from the stitches that were already at the edge all the way around the diamond, and then I started to work in rounds of pearls, knit rounds, some increases, and some yarn over knit 2 together. That's my eyelet pattern here, and I've just finished the second one there. And I'm working on a 3 3/4 millimeter, but I'm going to show you what it looks like when it's off the needle. So there's a beautiful diamond in the middle, and then you're working in the round for the center back, and then eventually one side is going to taper down, and then the other side is going to be knit separately back and forth and taper down. So So the pattern is called Twiggly. You can wear it as a scarf. And these are the fun little points, these little leaf designs. So you can wear it wrapped around the neck twice and it makes a cute little scarf. Or you can wear it straight out as a shawl. And this is designed by Jennifer Wiseman. It's a Ravelry pattern. And this is what I love. I love a self-closing shawl. So you can see how one end is inserted through the second. Then there's no need for shawl pins, no knots, no ties, no clips. So what Jennifer says about Twiggly, it's reversible, so there's no wrong side or right side. The cables are going to look the same on both sides. The eyelet will look the same, and the diamond looks the same. Reversible, it's knit in a sport weight shaped like an elongated diamond. Dramatic ribbed cables branch out from the center, ending in leafy tips that may surprise you. Each of them can be slipped through any of the cable crossings to fasten the scarf in place. With an easy garter stitch beginning, that was the diamond, eyelet accents, and intuitive cables, Twiggly is just as much fun to knit as it is to wear. And she also gives a great schematic, which is very helpful to see how the construction will happen. So I have completed the diamond, the eyelets around it. So I'm somewhere in this section here, and then it will start to taper off into a point, cast off, and then this end will be a mirror image. Really helps when you have a good schematic to show you the directions. So again, it's a little bit like a jigsaw puzzle, but it's all in one piece. I don't have to seam anything together. I don't have to measure anything and put markers on. So I'm very excited about that. And I think it'll be nice to wear in the spring. And because it's a very lightweight merino, it almost feels like cotton. So what we have in our color bin today is a dark charcoal, medium charcoal, teal green, that beautiful hot flashy almost neon pink, and an indigo blue, sun-kissed orange, and sunshine yellow. And I think those are all the colors in stock. We're waiting for a really flashy neon green to arrive next week, and purple. Always have to have purple. So again, it's a 2 skein project. It takes a total of 800 yards, give or take, with your tension. And you have the choice of using a sport weight, which is a little thicker than the one I'm using, or the fingering weight. She says don't worry too much about the thickness of the yarn. For a shawl, it can turn out slightly wider, slightly narrower. It's still going to be a great project. So as you can tell, I enjoy knitting things that are a little bit out of the ordinary this month. And self-closing shawls are always something that fascinates me. So this was a design of mine from last year called Into Thin Air. And as you can see, it is self-closing. You can ruche it together, gather it. It's knit in a very fine kid mohair with silk, and it is whisper light. There really isn't much to it. If I bring it over, you'll just see exactly how fine it is. It's not entirely plain knitting. There's a really interesting cluster stitch in there, which is supposed to look like raindrops. And it is a triangle shape. Here is the ruched effect. But if I unruche it, then you can see just how big it is. Light as air, but quite a large triangular shape with a little point. So there is a reason why I'm showing you this shawl, even though it wasn't knit this March, it was knit last February. What I used was the Kid Mohair and Silk. These are 25-gram balls, so it takes two 25-gram balls to knit that shawl, which is not a lot when you think of it. And there's some pretty pale colors and some stronger colors. But what I was fascinated with was the Shetland lace shawls, which are even finer than this and much, much larger. And they have a lot of history in each of the shawls, and they are called gossamer shawls because the wool that's used is spun entirely from Shetland Isle grown yarn, sheep yarn, but it's only one ply. So if you can imagine knitting with one ply, it would feel like you were holding thread over your finger. It'd be softer than thread because it's a wool, not a cotton, but it would be very, very fine. So a Shetland shawl is never knit with less than 6 miles of wool. I don't know how many miles are in here. I'm sure it's only maybe 1/4 of a mile in this one. So 6 miles of wool to knit one shawl, and an average knitter would spend 500 hours completing the shawl. So the center of the shawl is square traditionally, and it's all different lace patterns that are passed through the generations. Some of those are probably never written down. They're just passed from grandma to mother or aunt to niece, and so on and so on. And then there's a huge border that goes around it. So when each of those shawls is blocked, they use a wooden frame and they wire it onto the frame to block it. It is supposed to measure 6 feet in width. It's a square. But there is a test. So most of the Shetland shawls were knit during Queen Victoria's reign in the 1800s, and they were always knit as custom orders. So Queen Victoria ordered quite a few from Shetland knitters, and that's what got the whole trend started. But other people would order them too, wealthy people of course, and they would put in an order, and it would take sometimes 3 months to complete one of them. But there is a little test. Traditionally, a shawl cannot be considered a true Shetland shawl unless it passes the wedding ring test. Does anyone know what the wedding ring test is? It is the shawl being passed right through a ring. So I thought it'd be fun to see if my miniature gossamer shawl could fit through a ring. Does anybody have any bets if it's possible? Have you tried it before on a shawl? Have you knit a shawl that's gossamer? Okay, so let's get started. So I have my ring, which is a woman's size 8, not too big, not too small. And I'm going to start at the pointed end of the shawl and just see how far we can go with the ring. It usually takes 2 women together, Shetland knitters, because one has to sort of scrunch up the shawl and the other will twist it to pass it through. And their shawls are worn as wedding shawls. They're used for birth shawls, and just in the extreme cold climate, they would fold it over multiple times. So it's very light, but it gives extra layers. We might just be able to do it. I'm not forcing it because I don't want to damage the knitwear, but so far we've passed through about 3.5 feet, maybe 4 feet, and now we're at the widest part. So I'll start to twist it a little bit. Oh, I think it's going to work. Yep. Okay, so this shawl, for whatever reason, has passed the wedding ring test. So I'm quite proud of that. I can almost say I'm a Shetland knitter, but not quite. I could never spend 400 hours on one project. It just wouldn't be possible in my lifetime. I'm not even sure if Shetland knitters are still producing the same traditional type of shawl. I think they've probably scaled it down to maybe a 20 or 30 inch width and still 6 feet long. So they're probably making like 1/3 of the width as a rectangular shawl. And then it wouldn't take as long and wouldn't be as labor intensive. So that would be all my projects to show you this week. I'll be back next Friday with hopefully some new whips and finished objects. I might even have the Twiggly shawl ready to show you. This one definitely will be ready to show, and the kits will be in store. We do have an exciting knit along coming up, and that will start at the beginning of April. I'm just waiting for the yarn to arrive. I hear it's on the way. It's going to be a beautiful hand-dyed yarn that many of you already know and have tried. The colors will be very specific to the pattern, and I am also waiting for the pattern to arrive. It is still in the testing stage and the editing stage, and the designer has mentioned that it will be ready on March 18th. So as soon as I have more information, I will let you see it, and that will be our April knit along live here Fridays at 3 p.m. Thanks everybody for watching, and I hope you don't get blown away today. Enjoy your weekend and just make it March.